Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. As per usual this week, we'll be talking about everything that's going on around the country, of which there has been a lot, particularly with the election coming up. A big one in the news tonight, Tom. It's going to come to you first, but first of all, I want to introduce Carolyn Dean.
Hello.
Welcome back to the panel.
Thank you very much.
Tom Conroy.
Thank you, Bill.
Tom.
Yes, Bill.
Should Judith Collins be fired?
Yeah, to sack one of our panelists.
Yeah, that's right.
She hasn't said anything.
Yes,
No, absolutely not. Indiscreet comments for someone who speaks from the hip, fires from the hip. Stolen off emails. You know, there's some unsavoury behaviour in acquiring some of this information that's going around, and it's all piecemeal. It's all out of context. You don't know what went on before or after. Some of it's inappropriate, I think, disclosing some information, but no earth-shattering material, nothing that would worry about trusting her in terms of doing her job. She's had some very difficult portfolios, and I think she handles herself quite well, and just has to be a little bit better, make better judgments, I think, about who she shares the information with. But nothing that would frighten me, along with the rest of this whole ridiculous campaign, which I think is distracting us from the issues that we should be concentrating on about what the party's going to do. It's got no momentum for me whatsoever, and I'm yet to find a revelation of any kind that would make me think twice about where I cast my vote.
Do you think they're wishing, though, that they had really not had communication with Cameron Slater, that he's turned out to be a bit of a lead shoe for them? What do you reckon?
Have a go.
Absolutely. No, I mean, but it's not just we're having communication with Cameron Slater. Judith Collins is a close personal friend of his and has said something along the lines of, yes, well, I don't necessarily like what he's done, I don't necessarily like what he's said, but when you're friends with someone, you stick with them through thick and thin. What sort of thing is that to say about someone that's potentially, firing these shots out into the public and making these statements that are pretty horrendous, and he's an angry young man. I don't necessarily think that when you're a politician, a blogger and the way that he blogs is anyone that you want to be even slightly associated with, but let alone a close personal friend of. But that's got to be completely conflicting.
But what's the actual damage in the end?
For example...
Loss of confidence, perhaps?
Bad judge of friends.
No, but Judith Collins brought in legislation, or championed legislation, against cyberbullying.
Right.
Then she gave information to a cyberbully, Cameron Slater, who then used it to bully somebody, who then ended up getting death threats. Like, that's not a good look for someone who's championing legislation against cyberbullying. But she's saying, oh yes, but he's a good friend, and you stick with your friends through thick and thin. Like, it doesn't make politically. How does those two things can't possibly be genuine? There's no integrity in that. Surely,
the political cost, they must be thinking now, it's not worth it. I wish we hadn't done it. Surely, they can't. John Key is saying, it's dissolving away, which I think is an unfortunate statement, because I don't think it is it? It keeps coming up, not dissolving away at all.
Regurgitating the similar information. There's no new revelations that make you think, okay, it is indiscreet and there's some poor judgment made, but nothing they would think, oh my gosh, we've got corruption here, we've got some... It's just a bad judgment, and that at best, it's not, for me, sackable, and that was your original question. It's certainly not.
So Judith Collins, maybe not. But the fact, doesn't it unsettle you, Bill, to find out that our politicians are right closely into bed with Cameron Slater, a really voracious blogger?
Is there any difference from being close to a journalist in the past? Is there any difference to that?
Yes.
And they do get closer because they've all got access to put out information. And I'm sure some politicians have close relationships with journalists over the years.
I think the fact that it was under the radar is the difference, because with the journalists, they're publishing and they're out there in the public eye, and that
is he not doing that? Publishing?
Is he really a journalist, though?
No, but
it's not clear where the sources and the information are coming from. Are you saying that it is, but it's not necessarily with journalists?
That's correct. They often say an unknown source, people we've heard from, we understand, all those things that stop you attributing it to people, but are equally scurrilous because you have no source of note to point to. And what constitutes a journalist these days is that someone who has a public following on a written blog site, is that any difference when somebody has a following on a newspaper? There's actually a very small number of people that actually read this, and most of them are interested or involved.
I've got to say,
general public
I was
really
wondering that.
What is the number? Somebody told me 1,000 people, 1,000 hits.
No,
Is
it's
a day, or what is it though?
It's a lot more than that.
But what is it? I've asked a lot of people. What is the number of people that actually read it?
Well,
who are those people, and are they the same people going back and forth all the time, making those numbers look good?
It's pretty hard to tell at the moment because Whale Oil's blog is not, you can't access it
Right,
at the moment. So he said access is denied. You have to be invited to
Okay,
read
so that
my
makes
blog.
it an even smaller group of people.
Got a lot of hits.
No,
Very select group.
no
This has been the
So what
biggest
damage are you
boost.
doing? I mean, what do you...
No, Tom, it's huge. People, it's the most read political blog in the
Have
country.
you read it? Have
No.
you read it?
Yeah, I've read it before, yeah.
And-
I've read it when
and-
I've been
All the-
searching for commentary on something, and Google has taken me there. I won't say I'm not a whale oil reader. I've said for the first time I thought, well, who is this guy? But I was thinking, well, you know, okay, so he is definitely a right-wing blogger. Should he have such instant access to a Minister of the Crown? Someone who should really be, you know, as Minister of Justice and Minister of the Police, to 37-minute access on his official information request. It really does look like that he's got a channel there, doesn't it?
He's from an old national family.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what it is. It's sort of like Jobs for the Boys. And plus he's managing, if it's true, and I think it probably is, he's managing to get a retainer from the tobacco industry. Sort of, you know, all in the same kind of parcel of friendships and networks and things. So, yeah, I don't think, to me, it's under the radar.
So he's a right-wing pressure point.
But how are you going to stop it in this days of social media? You can't stop people from speaking their
you're not gonna
mind,
stop it. No.
and now that it just has to be an avenue to do it publicly. Well, there's not a lot you can do about it.
Well,
Maybe
you
the question is,
slow
should
to
that
that.
feed have been there from a Minister of the Crown to him so that he can put that, because he does exert right-wing political pressure. There's no question about
Well,
that.
and also Jason Eade,
Yes.
who's, you know, high up in the Prime Minister's
Yeah.
office. He's probably also feeding him information. It's the oldest trick in the book. I mean, politically, it's what you do. You
And
get
I think
someone
they've
on
been
your
doing
side
it
and you get.
absolutely.
But Cameron
Absolutely.
Slater, like, he's just such a. He's so. He doesn't have a heart, you know. He's just a soulless, like, angry
Well,
man.
a
He's just
woman's
there to
point of view
take
here.
people. He just seems to be there to
do
take
you think
people
people
down.
read it with that in mind, saying he's got such a chip on his shoulder that, okay, it's his view and it's extreme, but does it really reflect what anyone
Well, I
else
think his
thinks?
readers are
Not
going
really.
to be a certain group of national voters who will always vote national.
Yeah, that's not
And then there'll
know
be
how to
some
read a blog.
non-readers who would never read it because they come from the political left, and then perhaps a few in the middle.
I suggest it's a lot fewer number than you think.
Yeah.
But what it has done is, I think the way that he blogs and the way that he speaks about people has resulted in him getting some karma, basically. So somebody's come back at him with just as much anger and vehemence, and they've gone after him. So they've been able to get into his system, get all his emails, and blow the lid on him. So he's now feeling the wrath of the result of what he's been doing. And Nicky Haag has published a book, and then you've also now got this person who calls themselves Whale Dump, who is the source of the emails that Nicky Haag used to write his book.
Okay.
He kept some of the information back,
Right.
so he gave Nicky all the political stuff, but he kept quite a bit of information back, and he's now leaking it out through Twitter. And you've got the likes of John Campbell and the other media following to see what he's
And
going
pushing
to
very
release
hard on it.
next. And obviously it's all building up to the election. I don't remember an election ever being quite this.
Well, 4 years ago or 3
Yeah.
years ago, social media blogging was only in its infancy, probably, and now it's more prevalent. But I think it's just an extension of what we suffered through journalism. I don't think it's any different.
Yeah, you're
It's just a
probably
little
right.
bit more accessible than it has. But we had no idea when we picked up the papers in the old days where the information came from and how well sourced it was, who was feeding what information. I mean, you only have to watch the Yes Minister about how things are left on tables, and I'm sure it's a reflection 25 years ago of how journalists did break stories.
I think there could be a book written on it. And there's been one or two commentators have made the point that this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about this very issue and some of the bigger issues which are very relevant to the election and who you're going to vote for. Like
my question to you is, sorry to interrupt,
Yes,
Bill,
that's
to you
right.
both. I can ask you both a question, is that, do you think, from what you've heard so far, it's had any influence whatsoever on the outcome of the election?
I do.
No, I don't.
Okay, we'll go to you, Bill, then.
Right, okay,
Take
that
over
was
the
my
host
reasons.
again. To what extent? Explain.
Well, the reason is that I was wondering that myself, but I did read, I had a look at a graph of a poll that was taken. I wish I brought it with me. It said, the graph basically said 56% of people said it would make no difference to their voting.
Right.
And of the rest, which would be 44%, 9% didn't know, and the rest of them were either it could do, it's made a little difference, but there was about 9 or 10% who said it has made a big difference. And that's the kind of percentage which swings votes, which gets governments elected or loses an election. So you don't need a great number of percent. Interestingly, I think I heard Mike Williams say the other day that for example, with respect to the Internet Party, if they can drag out another 2 to 3, 4% of those young voters who basically don't turn out, that could make a difference to the election too. So, there'll always be those who vote National, there'll always be those who vote Labour, so those ones in the middle, those swingers. And that's what that poll said. I think it was published I'm trying to think where it was published, in the press somewhere anyway. So that's what I base my opinion on.
I think it's got a... Sorry, Karen, do you think not much?
I just don't think it will at all, because I think anyone that thinks that it's a terrible thing that Cameron Slater's got a relationship with Judith Collins and other people in the government will also think it's a terrible thing that somebody hacked files,
as I mentioned,
to get
right from the start,
the information.
Yeah.
So if they're working on the integrity value, then they're not going to go the other way either.
No, I agree that. And I think the only thing is it might throw a little bit of doubt about political integrity generally on the government, so that if anyone's going to suffer, it might be them a little bit, that they've been indiscreet. And it only has to be a small amount to bring the small parties back into the fray. Normally, in a two-body election in the old days, it wouldn't have had a hope of the difference, not a scarrot. But in this case, there could be just a tiny little bit of movement, and that's all it requires in MMP, the tiny little bit of movement. The Conservatives are claiming today that they've got 4.6%. I think they just thought of a number and doubled it, because it's just absurd that 4.6% of New Zealand would even think about that. Right. But anyway, but New Zealand First, you said they're looking at maybe 10 seats now, maybe 6.5, 6.3, and maybe they were 5.6 before this, because there's just those little bit of doubting voters, and it could have a slight influence in that point of view. Yeah. And I think it would be a sad indictment if it was, because we've been on the show 10 minutes, we haven't talked about poverty or health or policing or any housing or any of those things that actually are important. We're talking about gossip.
What government's going to do?
The internet. That is a disgraceful reason to
exactly, and that's exactly what I was saying before, that this is where all the talk has been.
It's overshadowed.
And it has overshadowed opening.
It is not about necessarily what was said, it's about how it was said, isn't it? Yes. It's about how it's been blogged and who's given what to who. But the actual information that's been passed has been relatively minor importance. Somebody's phone number, and the guy doesn't even mind. Well, he didn't say mind, he hasn't put in a complaint. No. So why are we arguing on that behalf? I don't understand.
And I just can't believe how much airtime it's taken up, to be quite honest. How much concentration of media. I saw the
There's a promise of revelation, the books and all those things we get, and it's the same with I won't call him your mate, the Internet Party launch. I know you've got a bit of faith in that being a revelation, but it's going to be nothing. But if you say there's going to be a revelation, people are going to swamp on the off chance that it is, and then when it isn't, they have to make something out of what you gave them, otherwise they look silly for turning up.
So what are the parties promising? And we've got. Let's talk about housing for a start. We've got the National Party just announced the other day a $20,000 start for houses, and we've got Labor saying, well, we're going to build 100,000 new houses. Generally speaking, I think nobody disagrees with the fact that we need lots more houses, and in Auckland it's causing a real crisis. Carolyn, which policy do you think is the one which would have more effect?
Out of
Labor, just looking at Labor and National there. So National with its $20,000 boost for new homeowners, or Labor saying we are going to build 100,000 government houses in 10 years.
Excuse me. Oh, good question.
You have to choose one.
Do I have to?
No, you don't have to
You don't
choose.
have to choose. No.
I'm just trying to think of it from a home owner and home buyer's perspective. I mean, in terms of voting, you would go with the Labor policy.
More
wouldn't
houses.
you? Like the 20,000.
No, the Nationals wanted the 20,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you go with that one because it sounds.
If you wanted to buy, if you wanted to buy a house, there's 20.
It's a first time owner. You
Yeah.
get $20,000
Yep.
if you earn less than 150,000. There's
That's
lots
right.
of criteria.
Well, but
around
most
it.
people do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd go with that as a voter if
Yeah.
I was a home looking in the. I was in the market for a home or a first. Is it just for first time?
Yes,
It'll be
first-time buyers,
first
yeah.
home
Yeah.
buyers,
Yeah.
and there'll be criteria. I mean, you'd have to stop people capitalising on it, you know,
Yeah.
to coin a phrase. Because the reason I brought that one up first is because I think the housing issue leads into the poverty issue, Tom. You know, if everybody's got a house, warm house, roof over their heads, then you've taken a major poverty factor out, haven't you?
But how do they buy a house once the houses are built? So under the,
Under Labor.
So under Labor, they're building 100,000.
Well, they've nominated a price. I just can't. 350. I thought
Yeah,
350
they
to
can build houses for
400,000.
350,000 to make it
Yep.
affordable for first
So
time.
how
And
do
yes.
they buy? So how do first-time buyers buy them? They just
Well,
still
then
need to come up with.
they get into a scheme there, and I guess they do it the normal way. But the house,
But it's cheaper.
We're talking Auckland, aren't we? They're going to be affordable. We're not
Right.
talking down here.
But
Get a
if
house.
National are talking about flexing the Kiwi Saver program so you can get more money out of it in order
Right.
to advance your chances. But what you've got to be cautious of here is that because Labor is so far behind the polls, they can say anything they like. It's not going to make any difference. Okay, they're not going to have to defend their actions. It's not.
You're assuming they're not going to get in.
They're not
Tom.
going to get even near it, and which is where Labor and Greens can say they can promise the world because they're always going to be on the other side. They're not going to have any.
John Key's
any-
not saying that about the polls, though. He's saying we need to be careful. We could be out. He said
Wow.
that a couple of times.
Mathematically, could be, but I don't think that's going to.
And I did hear a Matthew Hooton saying, I think on Monday on National Radio on 9 to noon, he said that he considers himself the poll guru, and he has summated the results of 100 polls before the 2011 election, and he had all the maths there, and he said whatever National comes out at in the polls, you take off 5 points as their final score for any election. And he said that's
Well, where do
always
you
the
put it?
case. Eh?
And where do you put it? And you'll be putting it with people that are going to be allies of theirs. I'll put money on it now.
You're talking a Māori-Party or ACT?
or New Zealand First, or some individuals to go.
Do you really think New Zealand First would go with National?
Yeah, I think they will. I think that's that. I think there'll be New Zealand First National coalition with Peter Dunn and various others, and there's nowhere else really for National to go. I mean, they're both sort of conceding that that's what they're going to have to
Yes.
do. And you watch the polls, and traditionally New Zealand First poll under what they actually get.
Oh, they
They're
do.
already in there getting 6. So you add a couple of percentages there, you're going to talking 10 MPs, you're going to be a reasonable power base.
But Winston's not just going to rock up and support the government, is he?
Oh,
He's going to want something.
Yeah, but he's still going to get the job.
Yeah, that's right.
All we're talking about is just machinations here.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
think this is why the Labor did come out with some. I have to say, in the last few weeks, some policies about Dunedin, about how accelerating the hospital rebuild and
Yep.
and encouraging industry there. But they all sound wonderful. But I can make up some policies that sound wonderful. How are you actually going to pay for them? And this is the other thing that's missing about their housing policies. People say, okay, well, it's a lot of money. Where's it all going to come from?
Well, they claim that they've had the thing costed
Fiscally
by
light.
Bill.
Who?
Bill.
What? Bill who? Bill Lives?
Oh, Bill.
what? I don't know.
Well,
You know,
see,
Bill,
they do all
economic
the
research
economic-
people.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And the Treasury, they claim that the Treasury believe that it's feasible as well.
So where are they going to be built?
Well, I would imagine that they're looking at Auckland where the shortage is. It won't be down here.
You listen to carefully to the rhetoric, though. The actual pin down some detail.
Yes.
It's light on any detail.
Right.
It's like today they were discussing about the cost of regional air travel, for instance, and they're both saying it's too expensive to fly in and out of places like Invercargill, like classic things. Would you buy back the airline to make them do it? Oh, maybe not. Yes, we are. We are very concerned about the cost of regional airlines. It should be less. I don't want to know that. I want to know, are you going to change it or are you not going to change it? And if you're going to be wish-washy and not make those changes and wish-washy about your housing, well, that's no policy.
Yes, I see someone was trying to pin down National the other day on the tax thing. Will there be tax cuts? And they wouldn't commit themselves to it.
That was the latest thing. There could be some tax relief before the election, but there won't be any details. Well, what does that mean?
Yes, exactly.
It's so hard to ever find policy that's actually going to swing people
Correct.
in any direction, one or the other. Doesn't it really come down to the charisma of the leader?
I think it does.
Yeah.
That's all it comes down to.
That's right.
Absolutely correct.
And this was the conclusion of this panel the other day. They said that that John Key, apart from, was probably the second most popular man in New Zealand, or, second only, of course, the captain of the All Blacks, and he was probably counting on that, the fact that people believe in him, and that all this other stuff would go away. But I have to say, before we go to the break, that one of our local blokes has kept shy of the whole lot. His name didn't come up in the book, it hasn't come up in the press as doing anything wrong, and he has basically said, well, I don't do that kind of Bill English. And I say, hats off to Bill English, that he's untainted by the entire thing, and he's Deputy Prime Minister. So well done, Bill. Got clean nose. The guy stands for something, clearly. So.
He has had one or two little glitches about allowances, I
he
think,
did.
over the past, being the Minister of Finance.
But Tom, that was 5 years ago. That's dissolved.
Nobody is squeaky clean.
Dissolved away, Tom.
It's all part of the conspiracy anyway.
Stick with us. We're going to talk about health and education when we come back. We'll be back shortly. We want to talk about education policy. Carolyn, the primary teachers have said we're not having a bar of what National is proposing, paying some teachers more, paying principals more. They said we want more teachers in the classroom. This is what's effective. You're not going to improve education by paying some people more money. Now, 93% of them voted for it. The Prime Minister...
Can I just ask for a clarification on
You can indeed.
Is the policy, as I understand it, and I stand to be corrected, is to pay them more to go to places they normally wouldn't go to strengthen weak schools. Is that essentially?
That's part of it.
It's not just paying teachers willy-nilly. We're going to pay you extra to go to a low decile school.
They've got another job to do. Yep.
And help out where they would need help.
And of course the reply is, well, when they're in that school, they're not in our school where they're working. And so what happens to those kids? That's part of it. And I think most teachers would say, you actually don't need to pay teachers more to get them to help out. Not in my 30 plus years in the profession or whatever. If somebody needs a hand, they get a hand, Someone comes along and helps them out, and they do it in their own time, they do it in the lunch hour, they do it whenever they can. You don't need to pay them more. It's been going on for years. And so the primary teachers anyway have obviously considered this. 93% have said we don't like it. And the Prime Minister has labelled it as a political stunt.
And they're going to push on regardless.
Yeah, and
we know what we're doing.
How would you like to take on 30,000 primary teachers?
I quite like the idea.
You like it?
The idea?
Well, what do you like about it though?
No, I like the idea of channeling resources to where they're required. Now, I know what you mean, the friendly pat on the back, give us a hand. It needs to be a lot more structured and organised though that. And you may not know that this school needs this particular skill. And therefore, and that you have it, and they might be at a different end of the country. They might say, well, we need, and so I think it's a good structure way to say, okay, here's our skill base of people, and here's our weaknesses, and we need to marry them up. And there's going to be some sacrifices you may have to move to help the school and be on hand to help them. So there is some monetary value in doing that, and I think if you're going to do extra work, it should be rewarded incrementally with what you're doing. So I don't think you can rely on the goodwill of people. Okay, it's down the road. I think it needs to be structured and organised, and if it's got a pay scale relevant to what it is, because already you do that, don't you, with your decile system. If you're a low decile school, you get more government help with
the school does, the teachers
don't.
Right.
No, but the school does.
The school does.
So therefore, why shouldn't it apply to the teachers that are part of that school to also be recognised for helping out where they have to do a lot of extra work? I think it's a good scheme.
I think there's no argument for payment for extra work, just whether it is the best way to invest $359 million.
I think you're channeling your strengths to where your weaknesses are. I applaud it.
Well, first of all, I never got that from the article that I read. So it was the way it was put across. The article that I read was just that teachers were going to be paid more for being better, basically. Sort of higher achieving teachers would get paid more. So
no, that's
like every other
profession. More like Tom said.
I missed that point entirely.
Yeah, and I think people have, and I'm not sure even maybe the teachers have sat down and thought about it from that point of view, because they may have the altruistic view that you have. We do help out, but it's not structured. And I think the schools that are needing the most help need that structured assistance. So, and I think that's a good idea.
I know the PPTA has they have a policy of supporting it and have met with the Minister, and a lot of it has been modified, so the amounts of money have been changed and whatnot, so that secondary teachers are agreeing with it at the moment.
What is it they don't like?
Well, I think that the primary teachers feel that they need a smaller teacher to pupil ratio. That's what they think is going to help the most. Yeah.
All you're doing is moving things from one place to another and leaving a gap back here. That's essentially, it's a good use of resources, but they're saying we don't have the numbers, we need the numbers, and then maybe start shifting people around.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it's a good idea or not, I think she's, Hiki Parata is biting off a lot to chew if she starts a fight with the primary teachers.
I think Key said he can legislate to make them do it.
Oh, he could too, but it might work about as
That'd
well
be a
as
good idea.
the standards. Legislate to make them do it.
He made the rules. He's got the money. He makes the rules. That's the way the world
we're
works.
just going to carry on.
They can legislate if they like, but it's not the best way to go ahead on something.
If
like
it's
this.
such a bad idea, there'll be no teachers apply for those extra jobs and the extra money. I'd give you no chance.
That would be what could happen if it's such a bad idea. Is you don't get the teachers applying for it who should apply for it. You know what I mean? People could be fairly belligerent about this and not do so. Then you might have other teachers who perhaps shouldn't be the ones doing it and might end up in those positions. I think that for something like this, you have simply got to have agreement. There is kids' futures involved here. So I think that whether they like it or not, okay, the primary teachers don't agree with it. I think they've got to put their head in their hands and sit down and say, we don't agree with it, we don't like it, but we are forced back to the drawing board, because I really do think they have the upper hand there. They're doing the actual educating. And
it's quite a feat to be a government that is working with a Minister of Education who presumably works with educators. To be able to come up with a scheme that 93% of the people that you've
Very good
supposedly
point.
consulted with are now
Correct.
going to reject.
Correct.
yes.
It implies that they had nothing to say about it, or they did, and they didn't realise what they were saying. Because you're dead right. It's come out of the system, which surely somebody just didn't make it up in the back room.
No, they didn't.
Surely they didn't.
I don't know actually where it arose from in the first place, but it does point up a difference. People say, a teacher's the same, primary, early childhood, secondary. They're not. Tertiary. They're not. The needs are different, and this has actually pointed it up. The needs in a primary school are a lot different.
Could there be a little bit of envy, perhaps, that this person is going to go to a school I wouldn't want to go to and get rather well paid for it?
But Tom, how do you replace the teacher that's gone?
Well, why would you? But you've already got a strength at that school, and obviously you've got a collection of teachers that can cover. What we're doing is you may have a specialty skill that this other school lacks, but your school you're coming from may have adequate cover there for that particular.
But if it's the PE teacher, for instance, and they're really good at
exercising,
archery,
okay, right, excellent.
and they go
That's
to
a skill
another
we
school,
need.
how do you replace the PE teacher in the school that they've gone from?
But I imagine that there's a range of slightly more specialised skills than archery that is required at particular low decile schools, of which there is a plethora of those skills available in the wealthier areas. You might have 3 teachers at your school who can teach archery, but there's no one who can teach archery at the lower decile schools, so the archer moves.
But what about the other things he was teaching, like cross-country and nutrition and those sorts of things? In his class,
it's unlikely that he was only going to be the only skilled. You're talking about schools, I'm guessing, that would have a lack of a number of skills, and from a school where there's probably 3 or 4 teachers that could teach a range of subjects, and they could cover there where there's none here.
So you're saying that class numbers are going to get bigger? Student numbers are going to get bigger in classes in the school that's been left. Does that make sense?
Now, what's going to happen is those teachers will be taken out and be replaced by a relieving teacher for half the time.
There's not a nobody there.
There'll be somebody there. It does unsettle the kids though. It can do, and
so it doesn't sound that well.
And there's another problem here is, are you going to take a teacher out of a decile 10 school and say, well, all the kids are doing so well there, they must be a great teacher, so they can go and show the teacher in the decile 1 school just how to do it? You know what I mean? This is an unworkable situation actually, because you can't compare the two. Or are you going to say, here's a teacher in a decile 1 school who's just working fabulous with these kids, a very, very difficult assignment, and you find these people around, they're absolute geniuses. And so we need to get this teacher's skill and export it by moving them. You take that teacher out of that DSOL 1 class, those kids, they get quite dependent on their teacher. It will unsettle them. And I think this is what the primary teachers are worried about, that if you take them out, then those kids will be unsettled, unless you can replace them, the teacher that's out for that period of time, with a high value person who's going to be able to fit into that role. Not always easy. No. But anyway, so we'll wait and see what happens really.
What's the alternate solution to help those kids that don't have the skills?
Well, basically, I don't know. I actually think what you've got to do is you have to take out, or you have to provide teachers who are available on a full-time basis, who haven't got responsibilities in their own class, fresh out of doing a really good job somewhere, take them right out for a year or a couple of years where they can go around and be a resource person, if you're going to do it that way. And I've seen those people working before and they do a great job. But that's only my opinion. Like, I think the real problem in tomorrow's schools has always been resourcing, be it money or be it actual resources.
Well, I think that a solution could be that you take the students out of school for portions of time. So they go out into the community and they learn out in workplaces and they learn out in other environments.
You're talking secondary school students,
obviously. Well, there's a little boy on YouTube. He's done the TEDx presentations, and he's totally self-taught, like homeschooled. But he has devised his whole curriculum, and to learn it, he does activities. So he goes out and he does snowboarding, and he goes out and he connects with someone in the community who teaches him woodworking or how to start a business and those sorts of things. Maybe something like that, where kids are going out into the community and learning these skills that they are getting in school.
Clearly the government is worried. Obviously the government's worried about teaching and learning. They are, because literacy levels have been falling and numeracy levels and whatnot. So they're thinking if we improve the teachers, it's going to actually improve all of these things. So they've got this lack, and so they say, well, teachers must be lacking. Well, it's not my opinion that is the case in the first place. I think that we're looking at other issues that perhaps ought to be looked at, poverty being one of them. Kids coming to school and just barely dragging themselves to school, having had nothing to eat before they come, and coming from a background where there's no encouragement. Because to be honest, if you're teaching in DSOL 8 to 10, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 school, generally the kids, they turn up and they're ready for education.
So you don't need as many teachers.
Well, the truth of the matter is, in a DSOL 10 school, Tom, I don't think you do. I think some of those kids are so self-sufficient, have so much backing from home, the teacher could almost throw the work down and they would do it. But then you get kids coming from other backgrounds, and the problems they're bringing into the school are problems which need addressing by one way or another, and the teacher ends up addressing them. They've got confronted, often teachers in some schools confronted with massive problems. They're looking at kids and thinking, you actually aren't dressed warmly, you've had nothing to eat this morning. And there's some pretty sad stories out there. And this is what concerns me, that the impact of what the government's doing, saying, all we need to do is improve teachers. It's a lot deeper than that. I'm sure some teachers do need to improve, but it's a lot deeper.
You sort of argued against yourself there. You're saying in those higher decile schools where the kids are more self-sufficient and fewer teachers, well, those excess teachers could go and help, which is what they're trying to do.
But no, that is the case now.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
As you pointed out before, those lower decile schools actually have a better teacher-to-pupil ratio. Right. They do already. And if you're working in a higher decile school, you'll be aware of that. But then again, those kids are survivors because of the situation that's there. It's interesting that in India now, they provide food, they provide lunch for every Indian kid when they go to school. I think we said on the program before, the whole lot get lunch provided. And they all look healthy and they're all learning. Probably better than some of our kids are in some respects.
They'll be at the major schools, there'll be some.
But it seems like if we get a national government, it could go ahead. If we get a Labor government, there'll be something else. Tom thinks there won't be something else.
I think get ready, it's coming.
Now, let's think about health for a minute. I mean, Labor was saying, okay, it's going to be free visits for over 65s, Carolyn, but now they're saying there's not enough money in the kitty, so there won't be. Do you really think that over 65s needed to have free visits to the doctor? Or was it just an election bribe?
Oh,
You're a long way off, years down that track.
Some over 65s yes.
Mm-hmm.
What I've noticed about that age group is that often they go to the doctor as a way of, it's sort of almost about reassurance. It's not necessarily a medical issue, and a lot of the time it's about, it's connection with people. It's something to do because they're not working anymore, and often they sort of lose connections and they lose a routine, and they don't have very much association with professional people anymore. And that's just an observation.
Okay.
That some 65s are sort of popping into the doctor, and actually the doctor is often getting them on schemes now where they get them in 4 times a year. They sort of join a club, which is about connection as well. So they're sort of having their needs met for sort of feeling like they're part of something. And the doctor will get them to come in 4 times a year to have this check and that check and da-da-da. And then they'll get them on, sometimes they'll get them onto pills and prescriptions that, I don't know, they may or may not require. So I can't really answer the question, do they need more doctor's visits or not, but I'm certainly an advocate. Free doctor visits, yeah. I'm definitely an advocate for the sorts of actions that you can take that prevent you from needing to go to the doctor. And one of those things is a sense of community, where you've already got social contact and you're not sort of relying on your doctor. So I'd say the numbers are probably somewhat skewed, certainly in that age group, as to whether those people are legitimately have something wrong or not.
And also more of them are still working at 65.
Yes.
Nowadays 65, they were all retired and that community group. But now they're talking at retirement age getting 70.
Yes.
And as we get more able.
Yes.
Well, I think that would reduce visits
absolutely.
to the doctor.
There wouldn't be any need to have free because you'll be working.
Actually that's a good way around that.
Yeah. And of course then there's the age-old ones about waiting lists.
I think it's more important to have the kids free.
Yeah.
To make it free.
Which the Greens have been suggesting.
For children up to a certain age. I don't know what that age is because it's got to be affordable, but I think that's perhaps more important. I'm saying no disrespect to older folk, but I just think if you've got to choose where to spend the money, then I think to invest it there is possibly where there's more need. There's more need. And
most governments have been putting that money there in the past, haven't they? They've been free doctors' visits up to a certain age. Which we will never argue
I'd rather see schemes in place for older people that give them the ability to exercise and to do things like yoga and meditation, those sorts of things that are actually proven to reduce, the reasons why you need to go to the doctor, and to be parts of groups. So they might go walking or whatever it is that they do. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Rock and roll.
I didn't mention that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily go to the doctor. I think if you're
well.
If you're well. If you're active and you've got people.
And I think that's what some of the parties have been saying that they are going to be. They'd like to promote the healthy aspect.
It's a holistic approach.
That's
what I keep hearing, isn't it?
It works though. People get sick because they get lonely.
That's right. And then you go to the doctor and you catch something in the waiting room.
And it's something which those of us who are reasonably gregarious, which is probably us sitting here. That's why we're here.
It's not you, is it? You're not gregarious.
I'm fairly gregarious. We don't think of that being a problem because we don't have that personality type, but it is. People do get isolated, don't they?
Once you're out of the workforce.
You make a very good point there because I've talked to a number of people who are on the verge of retiring, legitimately worried about what they're going to do tomorrow. They've just, their whole life has been work in the workplace, and as soon as you do leave work, no matter how you can pop in occasionally, it's not the same, and the work moves on and you become almost a nuisance.
You do.
And you don't want to be. So suddenly, if you haven't got a lot of things outside of work in particular, and a lot of those things, as someone said to me, he says, I enjoy golf, but I can't play golf every day of the week, and I'm not going to get any better at this age. What am I going to do?
It's about self-worth too. So that
what have I achieved today?
Lacking self-worth and that declining, people are likely to get more sick and to come down with different things.
And you have more time to think about things wrong with you and
to
self-analysis.
Search the internet to see.
That, you never want to do that. Yeah, that's right.
Self-diagnosis of the internet. But you're right, it's something which we can't ignore. There's more and more people reaching, us baby boomers are getting there, reaching this age. There's going to be a huge number, and therefore the problem can only get bigger. If it becomes a problem, or whatever part of it is a problem now, it's not going to diminish.
What about outsourcing consultations over Skype to parts of the world where there are a lot of doctors and it's cheap.
Right, like Queenstown. That would do.
Or using these people who can't get work as doctors,
Yeah.
although they're qualified, these immigrants who are totally qualified and can't get work, they could be sort of a first port of call.
Exactly.
Sounding board.
Or,
But you're right about the age. I think I don't know the exact numbers, but the life expectancy of a male in 100 years ago was late 50s,
Yeah.
58. That was sort of an average.
Exactly.
And now it's 68. It's grown like almost a year for every 10 years that's passed.
Very much so.
So that's a rapid growth.
Yes.
And so in 100 years' time, it's going to be 78. 88, how much longer can we extend the life? It's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spare time to fill in once you retire at 65.
Well, they tell
Well, I
us,
know
as
what
you
they
pointed out quite rightly, Tom, we might not be retiring
What
at
they could do is
65.
stand for council.
Well, and you'd be able to give good advice on that. Yes.
You're not suggesting retired and unemployable people are on the council, you know? No, that's not true at all.
Good place
You
to
were on
be.
the council.
Exactly.
But it means you can make a meaningful contribution because you've got so much experience. That's what you meant, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I knew that was
in
the case.
time.
I think whatever happens with all these, every government is going to be up against a wall with health, aren't they? Because the costs are just getting greater, the cost of treatments are greater, more people are requiring surgery, there are more surgical techniques. You can get more bits of your body replaced.
Well, that's why people do live longer, because what was a terminal heart condition now is, I wouldn't say quite routine, but it's certainly highly fixable.
How many people do you know who've had liver or kidney transplants and heart transplants?
None.
Don't you? Oh, well, you must be.
I know of people.
Oh, okay,
I know of people. Oh, no, well, I do. I suppose I've known some sports people.
Right,
John and Lemon. Yeah,
Well,
right.
you know, just
We all know of people. Yeah.
I've met, you know, and talked to people who've had heart and lung transplants, 2 or 3 of them. You know, if they were that rare, I wouldn't have met them. And I know, you know, 3 or 4 of my friends have had kidney transplants and liver transplants.
But I know lots of people
It's not that unusual.
have had the bubble, you know, the bubble put in, the stent,
Yes.
which would have been a death knell without that
Yes.
20 years ago. And it's a day, pop into the hospital, get a stent, and then you're alive.
Yep.
In 1955, that was it.
That's right.
No chance. So it's an astonishing improvement in medical technology. So pay for that by all means.
Exactly.
You know, and there's numerous other examples where things would have just been unfixable. And we're not talking about just comfort, knees and shoulders and legs and that. Things hips you can replace. And we're talking about things that could kill you.
Exactly. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back with topics of interest amongst other things, so stick with us. We'll see you soon. One thing we need to talk about is the employment situation in Southland, which has been in the news lately. Some suggestion that young people are leaving town. When I looked at the statistics, so Tom, our young people have got a better employment statistic than the rest of New Zealand. For example, 15 to 19-year-olds, we've only got 16.1% unemployed, which sounds horrible to me, compared to 26% nationally. 9.9% of the older ones in the 20s compared to 13.7% nationally. Does it seem to you that we have got a problem here? Should we be doing anything about it?
I think there is. I think there's businesses are closing, and I don't think there are the job opportunities that there were. And I think we're going to have a great difficulty keeping those younger people. I think you'll keep the families who want to raise kids here where they can get, if they can get jobs. But I'm genuinely concerned about Invercargill being a lot quieter than it was even 12 months ago, 2 years ago, in terms of business activity. I've talked to a lawyer recently. He's been here for 40 years. He said in terms of the commercial trades going through his office, he thought it was the quietest he's ever encountered.
Right.
I talked to someone just casually the other day that said they walked down S Street at 1:15, her and a friend, they were the only 2 people on the street on a weekday. That they could see. There are only 2 people in the street. So where I know retailers.
Yeah, the financial figures look good.
Well,
Southland, I think, you know, productivity.
But how is that being generated? Is that through farming where there's not a lot of employees? There's a few. There's quite a few. But what about the trade in town? The businesses don't require people on production lines anymore. That's where the employment will come from. And I think the young people are looking outside at other opportunities in other towns, Dunedin or Christchurch. Christchurch is perceived to have a lot of opportunities, if not now, certainly in the near future, with all the new building and companies that are starting up. I think we're up against it. I think the drift towards, and even when you go to Wellington, you talk to them, they're talking about going to Auckland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're talking about going to Christchurch. Wellington people are talking about going to Auckland, and I think Tim's always been a philosopher about the equatorial drift. You go to the city that's closest to the equator.
Oh, yes.
And which tends to be the biggest one, which is obviously Auckland. The weather's better, perceivably.
Yeah.
And I am concerned. Years ago, it was the bus, wasn't it? The bus leaving town every minute. I don't know whether it's to that extent yet, but I do see a turnaround.
The population is stabilised.
It's stabilised, but are they employed? I don't know whether they're going to be.
Carolyn, does there need to be some government action here, like, say things like government call centres that could be put anywhere? Should the government be saying, well, the regional cities are important too. Maybe they should take some action and put one here, put one in, I don't know, Greymouth, somewhere else, rather than just plonking everything centrally and then being faced with a housing crisis in Auckland, which we're all expected to pay for, a transport crisis in Auckland, which we're all expected to pay for.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Perfect. You put the government's got the ability to put those call centres and hubs wherever they want to put them, and if they so desire, they can put them in areas and they can relieve their own crisis in Auckland, bring up the regions.
Because in today's modern society, there is no need for things to be, just following on from what you said, Tom, centrally located anymore. It seems to me that they could be anywhere.
Yeah, I agree, and it's more the sort of thing that more people would want to do, as opposed to primary industry, which we have jobs in down here, but
we certainly do.
People don't necessarily want to do that. It's
it's a specialist nature.
It's hard work and it's pretty early mornings, and
if you look at the nationalities,
young people are afraid of getting their hands dirty, though. I mean, is there an element of that there?
Yeah,
I think there must be.
and it's dairy industry is hard work. It's early mornings.
Which nationalities come and work in those industries?
Yes.
The people who have come from hard-working societies.
A farmer made the comment in the Southland Times, you've got kids from 16 to 20-year-olds being asked to work 11 days in a row. Perhaps we need to do something about that, make it a bit more friendly. I mean, that's 11 or 12 days in a row. It is not really conducive to having a life, is it?
No.
I mean, does this need to happen? Or is it just by choice of the employer? Who knows?
I don't think that's particularly taxing.
What's that?
11 days in a row. It's not enough.
You think it should be? You think it should be more, Tom?
Absolutely.
Work
hard.
You got to think about the person's network as well. Like if you're working 11 days, then what about kids and what about partners and wives and husbands? Like you've got to bring all that into account as well. Quality time with your family.
They can work alongside you. You can see them and they can work 11 days each.
But there's got to be some kind of way, I agree with you, Bill, that maybe there's a way of rejigging these primary industry jobs so that they're more attractive. Maybe there could be more training that goes with them that help to develop people in other areas and things that make it more attractive to them so that we can get these jobs filled and improve our employment rate down here.
Well, to me, I mean, it's costing the country money not to. I think as long as we keep addressing these major problems that we get through cities getting bigger and bigger, nowhere to live, no land, it's costing us a fortune. It might be cost a lot less, a bit of bribery and corruption to get people to come and live in the cities. And a lot of people, when they come here, they say, wish I'd come earlier. Like I know one guy from Auckland, and he said, I love it down here. I said, well, you get a few of your friends. He said, look, I'm not going to do that. He says, it's the best kept secret in New Zealand. But he's sort of joking. But topics of interest now, you're first.
My topic of interest is the block, and it was on the TV3 website as news.
Yes.
So I am allowed.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
It's a media, it's part of the media, yep.
Media, right. So the block, so the last one that was on was the first one that I really watched. And the people that, just as an aside, the people that won it came away with about 260 grand. They got the profit on the reserve that they sold their house for, and they got an extra 80 grand.
And they got paid to do the show.
Did they?
Yes. You get paid to do
so. So that, it was good. It's good for them, not so much for the others. But my point about it really is
was
just...
a competition.
Yeah, no, it was, they did really well out of it. But the thing that really interests me about the block is that it's such an incredibly effective marketing vehicle for the advertisers. And what a way to advertise, because it's a competition, it's engaging, you get these people that are real people doing something quite difficult. You get to know them, so you build a relationship with them. And then you see a product that they're using and you think, oh, if they're using that, then I'll use it. And this product placement in that show is amazing.
So advertising works, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
absolutely brilliant. And I guess that's how they fund it. So it's really just a big advertising vehicle that's just cleverly disguised as a really good show. And I just,
I agree with
I
the
just
first bit.
think
Not sure it's a really good show, but
it's
I do
such a
understand.
good show.
It's very effective. People go on
Really,
tours to drive around Auckland and see Auckland, of course. The block's not filmed in Invercargill, I notice.
we could do one down here though.
Well, that's the thing. That's if those shows were filmed in other places, then they'd share the spoils. But they're not. They're going to be filmed in Auckland. And people do. They do these tours. They drive around and have a look at them on a Sunday, and there's traffic for miles.
Yeah.
It's that fascination about what they see on TV.
And it could be a way to showcase your city. You know, if you took that perspective of it, because it's going out to the nation.
That's correct.
So I just think it's very clever, and that's the way to go. You know, I hate selling. I hate to have to sell anything to people that they don't want.
Right.
But that is an incredible way to sell.
A brilliant idea, you think? You're
Brilliant.
impressed.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you've got this emotional attachment
Yes.
to the whole thing, and then you see this product like a splash bag, the most amazing splash bag that you've ever seen.
She wants one. She wants one.
or tiles or curtains or whatever it is. Yeah, it's just so much better than seeing it in a shop window.
Correct. When you see it in place, in situ, and how it can be used. And
Tom.
No, my subject,
Yes.
amazingly, having not conferred prior, is
Yes.
an extension of that exact argument. Is
Right.
that the power of TV is still far bigger than social network by a million miles. And I keep hearing, and that's a very good example of how it is so influential.
Yeah, it's
that
in your living room.
It's in your living room. And I hear all the time when you're trying to sell television or trying to promote television, and especially from the younger community, the internet's the way to go, and YouTube and all those wonderful devices, which have their place, no question. But it's after the fact. Television is still by far 85% in the latest poll of New Zealanders get their first video experience through watching it on standard TV.
Amazing.
The follow-up the next day is where the YouTube has the effect. Oh, I missed that item. I don't have to watch the whole show. I can just YouTube this guy doing something silly. Very effective.
I agree.
But what it's doing is it's influencing people to go off TV a little bit in terms of the spend, and it's a real struggle out there at the moment because they think it's about to happen. But a very good example, told by someone of great influence, is said in Silicon Valley. There's a city there. They have absolute fantastic, the latest internet technology, the fastest internet technology, the latest gadgets, the latest cell phones, because it's all trialled there. And a question was asked of them, I'm surprised anyone at home even has a TV. 90% of their first viewing in that city is done on standard TV. 90% or through Sky decoders or whatever time. And the question was asked, how come when you've got all this fantastic technology, it's not running away like we're being told? And the answer was that it's very hard to get people to watch it. If you log on to look for something, fantastic. But how do you get the casual person to pick up on things? TV, it's the surfer. You flick across and you see the splash bag. It's so easy, and you start watching things you normally wouldn't. On the net, you go looking for things you actually would.
You end up with an ab swing on TV, and you would never
go on myself. As you know,
and it comes down.
I didn't know that.
Didn't you know that? I have an ab swing. It's very
comes
good.
Down to those who are setting
very
up
good.
the program for the various stations, putting a lot of time into thinking what will people want to watch, and you start on something. I would never have started on that if it wasn't there, so therefore you wouldn't go looking for it on the internet. I agree.
It's like City Talk or one of those shows. Who would ever know to even go to find it? But
that's right.
Yeah, flicking through an armor and you say, that's an interesting concept, I might bring it up.
And we often get that comment.
So, and that's what they say the internet can never do. That's the one bit they can never replace.
Right.
And our hits per hour on Sky decoders are far more. It's like 16,000 hits per hour on queue. On a Sky decoder, if you got 16,000 hits on YouTube, you'd be celebrating. But imagine what all the other stations do, because people are sitting there flicking through all the time. And
bang,
they
bang,
hit,
bang,
hit,
bang,
hit,
bang, bang.
and they're not sitting there logging on the computer,
No.
especially if you're over a certain age. And blogging and all those things, that you've got to know where to go to look.
Extremely high.
Unless you're looking for cat videos,
Yep.
then you're just surfing on YouTube.
Right.
No, but I got to come up. 10% of things go viral, 90% goes missing on the net. That's
There's a figure for you. 10% viral, 90% missing. Well, it's something we don't want you to miss, and that's what's coming up on Wednesday night.
lovely segue, Bill.
Oh,
That was
did you
very
like that,
good.
Tom?
Oh, very impressed. Carry on.
We're going to put a graphic up on the screen for you right now so that you can see when you can see the interviews done by Rachel Smalley of the New Zealand Herald. Very competent interviewer with the leaders of the political parties. Now, I think National Party, Labour Party leaders, they've got their own sessions, and then the other smaller parties are gathered together in one. You can see those right here on QTV. The only place you will see them on television. So be looking out for them, running on Wednesday nights, 8 to 9 p.m. in September for a start. And later at other times too, you can look through your program guide to find when else they're running. We do encourage you to watch them. They're great interviews. And on that happy note, we will see you again in October, but take a look at those in September. We'll see you again. Thanks for watching.